Let's now focus on the presidential petition, and President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission beat the midnight deadline to file responses to the election petition filed at the Supreme Court by National Super Alliance leader Raila Odinga. Uhuru's legal time filed documents at 9:07 p.m. while IEBC was at the Supreme Court at 11:25 p.m. And gentlemen, we would like to just listen into that, and before we can have your comments on that.
No party in the case is leaving anything to chance. And as required by law, the president's legal team was last night at the Supreme Court right on time and confident that they had done their homework. The president, who is listed as the third respondent in the petition, had earlier said that the Jubilee Party was ready to file the documents. And about 2 hours later, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission was at the Supreme Court's registry filing documents exactly 35 minutes to the midnight deadline. Led by CEO Ezra Chiloba, the commission
there they go
in the petition, the electoral body and its chair Wafula Chebukati are named as first and second respondents.
There they go in.
Chiloba said that they had done the best for the country and that the much they can do for now is to wait for a 7-judge bench verdict under the presidency of Chief Justice David Maraga.
It's been a lot of work since we started this process. We have now brought in our response together with the supporting documentation, and we hope to do that, to file within time. So as we speak now, the registry is open for us to be able to submit or to file our response.
Together with the petitioner, the respondents and the court, everyone is rushing against time. NASA team has up to 1 p.m. today to file written submissions, while the 3 respondents have up to 3 p.m. to do so. At the same time, the parties will be in court this morning for interlocutory applications. According to the timelines, the pretrial conference will take place tomorrow. Kenaseka, KTN News.
All right, so gentlemen, that's what we have so far, and the next 7 days, the deadline being Friday for the Supreme Court to give a ruling. Possibly your comments, Jim, on where Kenya and how far Kenya has come in terms of maturing democratically, given that this is a constitutional process.
Number one, I think we must be very glad that we have the opportunity to challenge a presidential election at that level, because it is something that in many African countries, it is not a practice in many African countries. So that is something to be lauded. However, I think we have, in 2013 was the first time we had a real challenge on President Uhuru's election, and which the court upheld his victory. And then again, we have the same happening to him again in 2017. And one of the things that came out after the 2013 election was that this was a president whose election had to be validated by a court of law and not really by the majority. And so I think many people will be watching this to see whether he becomes 2 times lucky again to be validated by the same court, or if this time Raila Odinga will again be lucky. However, let's also look at that petition in itself and the fact that we've seen when NASA came, we thought they brought in a lot of documents, 25,000 pages, until the IEBC came in and they came with a truckload of evidence or files to be filed. And so you can see how much every party is giving to this, and everyone is saying we are right, and so let's wait and see probably how the court proceedings will proceed from next week.
All right. Evans, your thoughts on how mature we are becoming democratically speaking, because this is obviously something that would not have been possible many years ago, during the time, previously, this would not have been possible. But now we're getting to a point where we can actually use the court system.
Yeah, sure. As I has pointed out, I think our democracy is actually on a major test. If you look at a situation whereby people line up and vote, quite a lot of people lined up, woke up in the morning and vote, and probably in their minds they elected their leaders. But then we are now found ourselves in a situation whereby 7 people are going to validate that entire democratic process of being able to cast your vote and to elect a leader. In a way, you look at it like as politically we actually maturing, but also in another way you would look at it like a leader whose presidency is going to be determined by 7 people, as opposed to millions of Kenyans who voted, then puts our democratic process to be in a situation whereby people might start questioning that, will every election be decided by the court? Mm-hmm. That's where, when you feel like it is also good to go to the Supreme Court to challenge an election, but then if the Supreme Court's practice will be to validate, but people don't expect anything more than that, then that becomes a challenge on our democracy. Mm-hmm. But also it's important to actually point out that I think we need to go to election knowing that we're going to elect leaders. And at the end of the day, you elect leaders who you don't have necessarily to go to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you tend to look at it like, is going to the Supreme Court just going to validate a process that already been taken place, or there are actually very valid reasons to challenge the process? Not discussing actually the nitty-gritties of what is going to happen, but I think that I think we really need to be able to trust institutions, both the electoral institution and also the courts. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think a couple of weeks we've had lawyers trying to predict the outcome, which I think it's also very wrong. Because when you predict an outcome of a process that needs to be tied to a democratic process, then you're actually trying to say to majority of people that this is how
influence what
actually, yes, you're trying to and that was very wrong. And I also applaud the court itself, I think, pronounced itself on that particular matter, that people need not to discuss about a cause that is actually going before the Supreme Court.
All right, Brian, whereas it's a good thing that we are using the institutions that we have set in place constitutionally for any grievances, I think it would have been better for all Kenyans if this was seen as transparent, free and fair, and right from the word go, at the point where whoever wins and is pronounced and everybody feels confident. Now, is our problem as Kenyans likely to fade off as we go along? Because if we keep using these institutions, which again are under attack from the same leaders, and it's not just the courts. I mean, if you look at the likes of the EACC, if you look at different institutions that have been put in place, we seem to have a problem as a country of trust in those institutions. How do we fix that?
Basically, the only way of fixing trust is by Kenyans having their democratic right. What is happening is when Kenyans went out to vote, they expected results. But what came out after, as expected, as usual, were wrangles after wrangles, people pointing fingers at each other, leaders pointing fingers at each other. Along the line, Kenyans are divided along tribal lines, ethnic lines, and even religious lines. So,
and is that narrative true, that Kenyans are actually divided on tribal lines, or does that only come up during election times? When you look at the workforce, when you look at business, I'm not sure there are many Kenyans who sit down and say that is somebody from a different community, I won't sell to them, or I don't want to do business with them. It's only when it comes to politics.
Yes, that is very true. When it comes to politics, that is when Kenyans tend to get divided. When it comes to business, okay, look at it. People in Nairobi, you live in apartments. You have neighbors. You don't hate on them according to where they come from. But now, when we reach the election year, people tend to go back to their roots. Now, what normally happens is our people are so much brainwashed that they tend to think that a victory for their tribal leader is a victory for them. You understand? So we are divided. We are divided along those lines. I mean, and you cannot deny the undeniable. Look at the social media. The hate is just too much. And I mean, we have to talk about it. We pride ourselves as a country in the different cultures that we have. But how are we going to exist peacefully? And that is why we're seeing a lot of issues coming in that probably I think we'll talk about later. But Kenyans are so much divided, that's the truth. And the only way for us to remain united is for justice to prevail. And you know, for peace to prevail, okay, so if you're divided, then there's no peace. I mean, peace, absolutely, we're just living by faith and hope that the Supreme Court or the ruling that will come out will be of the goodwill of the Republic. The win should not be for NASA or Jubilee. The win of the ruling, the win should be of the Kenyans. The win should be of the masses. Because the masses comprise this nation, but we've let it be a communities affair or political dynasties affair. That is what we've let this country to be. But that narrative has to change.
It has to change.
It has to change, yeah.
Okay, Jim, how do we fix the trust issue? Because we have institutions, we have laws, and having laws and institutions over time has proved to us as Kenyans may not necessarily be the silver bullet that will solve our problem.
I think one of the things is that we have to, in a way, dichotomize the political, and let's just in this particular case focus on the judiciary, the political class and say the judicial class. Because one of the things, when NASA, before it filed its petition, one of the things that was said is this is an opportunity for the judiciary to redeem itself. And that was in a way saying that they do not agree with the pronouncement that was made in 2013, and so they hope that this pronouncement that will be made in 2017 will be agreeable to them. But you see, the true test, and you asked earlier about our maturity, the true test of how mature or immature our democracy is not just in the fact that we are able to go to court, but will be in the fact that when we look at the proceedings of that court, when we look at the ruling of that court, will it be said at the end of the day that surely this was a credible and it was a fair process? That is where the true test of our maturity will be. But in terms of restoring the trust, I think it will take a bit of time. But until the political class are able to totally sideline themselves, because they are the people who poke holes into these institutions. They're the people who poke holes into the IEBC, into the judiciary, into the defense forces. We, the people of Kenya, have in a way trusted these institutions because when we passed the constitution, which
it was
created
that these
institutions would work. So until now, the political class came and hijacked that very constitution, and now they are staging a coup of the constitution by constantly poking holes and even in a way desiring that they be the ones to control the process.
All right, this is Kivumbi 2017. It is the early edition of Kivumbi 2017. At this point in time, we want to take a commercial break as we release KTN Home for Life and Style to begin. On KTN News, we continue looking at some of those stories that made the headlines and some of the political intrigues that have been witnessed this week. Do stay with us right here on KTN News for that discussion. For KTN Home, goodbye.